Today, we become legends.
In patch 11.7, a ton of fan-favourite items from Smite's past have been brought back to the game, but was it a good idea or not? Let's talk. I'll get into specific items in a second, but in general, I think this was a fairly good idea in the context of where Smite is at right now. The game is sort of on its last legs, and Smite 2 will be going 24/7 in about 6 weeks from now. I think in terms of the long-term health of the game, this was a bad idea, but honestly, I don't think Smite 1 has a long-term future anyway, at least not in terms of many years going forward. So doing crazy stuff like this that would destroy the game in the long term but create some short-term excitement, fun and nostalgia is probably a good thing. I think many of these returning items are completely fine and were great to bring back, such as Stone Cutting Sword, which gives auto-attack junglers an actually good rush that competes with Jotuns, and could help shift the meta away from the same 5 or 6 ability-based assassins that have dominated the meta for what feels like years at this point from the jungle. Ring of Hecate is a similar situation in that it gives magical ADCs an actually good rush item that can compete with what physicals have access to in the ADC role. We're already seeing the impacts of this with Freya and Kronos loving this item as a rush, and magical ADCs actually competing with hunters for the first time in what feels like forever, which is great for variety in the meta. And Chile is whatever really. I know a lot of people really love this item, but I could take it or leave it. It was never bought all too much and wasn't broken. It was only removed because of the bruiser item removal, but it is a nice option to have available to tanks in terms of a hard counter to channeled abilities or combos from mages. Ikevol I think is a really great returning addition as well, as one of very few items in Smite that you actually have to think about when you want to buy it. It's an amazing item if you want to dominate the 1v1 trades against the enemy ADC in lane and get an early lead to snowball, but will make your build suffer in the late game full 6 items compared to other slower options, so I do think it has a really good trade-off and allows you to play how you want to play, which is great in my opinion. Shifter's Shield is another great one that I think can find a healthy place in the meta without completely breaking the game once they nerf the stats on it a little bit. The core idea of the item is a great one, but this thing can't have 300 health and 50 of each procs without being a stacking item. It's just way too strong right now. Nerf the health by 50 or 100, or nerf the procs by 10 on each, and I think this item can find a great place in the meta as an aggressive tank item without just being in almost every single tank build, no questions asked, which is kind of what it is right now. But overall, I like the idea of Shifter's Shield returning. Shield of the Phoenix I think was actually implemented fairly well too. You all know I was and am still not a fan of the power and protection bruiser item removal, but in this case, I think the item actually benefits from it, since it can now be built on any tank, not just physical ones, which allows some Guardians to be really strong users of this item. Most notably Artio of course, but others can use this well too, and I think anything that brings Guardians into more viability in solo is a good change. The role has been saturated by only warriors and the very occasional single Guardian being viable there, like Cthulhu at the moment, and seeing more Guardian play in the role makes it more interesting, so I'm all for that. So overall, I think Shield of the Phoenix was actually implemented fairly well, though of course Arthur probably needs some kind of nerfs to balance out the fact that he has access to this effect again. But the item on a whole, I do think it has been implemented pretty well. Alright, so that's all of the returning items that I think were implemented well and can actually work in the long term of the game, but we have 2 left that I think might not have been a good idea and potentially should get removed again. First up is Hide of the Nemean Lion, which on a purely selfish level as a solo main, I love that this item is back and I'm drinking up the tears of the salty ADC mains. That being said, I do think this item is a little unhealthy for the game on the whole, as ADCs are literally meant to be the tank killers, and while buying this item is far from completely stopping ADCs killing tanks, I do think the game is at its healthiest when the rock paper scissors is intact. That being ADCs kill tanks, tanks kill ability users, and ability users kill ADCs. Of course, that triangle has been eroded in other ways over the years, especially with ability users having access to full percent pen and tank shred effects without sacrificing any other aspect of their build, which makes tanks actually die to all damage rolls very quickly, not just the ADC, but that's a topic for a different video. In terms of Nemean, I just think this item is a little bit antithetic to the design of Smite's team fights, and I do empathize with ADC mains that claim this item stops them doing their only job in fights. That said though, ADC mains really can't complain too much because of the item I've saved last for this video, that of course being Hasten Fatalis. Nemean I think could maybe work in the game with some changes, but Fatalis I think is just too much and there's a reason it was removed. Is it fun as hell to play with? Absolutely, but is it equally unfun to play against? Definitely. Of course this item has made Freya debatably the best god in the game, which is a problem in itself, but some specific nerfs to Freya could maybe fix that. However, I think Fatalis on any pick is just inherently unhealthy for the game. The only real drawback drawback to ADCs besides their weak early game is that if you can get on them and burst them down, they will suffer. Fatalis just makes that so much harder than without this item, as actually landing hits on ADCs with Fatalis is just way too difficult when you yourself are slowing down in order to do damage to them, but they're still moving at full speed while completely shredding you from range. This item is already causing massive problems even in a patch where Nebian is back and tanks are quite honestly the strongest they've been since 10.1 launch. If tanks get nerfed again, which is almost a certainty given Hi-Red's track record in recent years, this item will be even worse for the overall health of the game. Maybe Fatalis could work if they had some kind of stacking mechanic, sort of like in Smite 2. Maybe you get 25% reduction per basic attack, so after 4 attacks you're at full Fatalis value, so there is at least still some kind of window of counterplay where you can get on the ADC before they go Super Saiyan. But honestly, I think this effect should not be given to hunters in general, and along with Nebian, I think these two should not have been brought back and probably were a mistake. But what do you guys think about the returning items? Are you a fan of them in general but have issues with a few like me, or do you think they're all great or they're all trash? Let me know down below and I'll catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day and peace out, you nerds.